Good? Good morning, everybody. Sorry about the delay. A bit of a technical glitch on the back end, but yeah, we're good to go. Thank you so much for taking out time to be with us this early morning. My name is Baba Agba. I'm the Special Assistant to the President of Nigeria on Creativity. So I work out of the Office of the Minister of Culture, advising her on film, music, and entertainment. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I know it's an early start for us and at the festival, but yes, it should be fun. I'll go right into it. So there's a quick presentation. I'll try and make it 7 to 10 minutes, and then we'll invite our panelists up, and then we're able to, take some questions and have some conversations. So I'll just talk a bit about what you have up there. So, you've got the ministry, you've got Nigeria Everywhere, Screen Nigeria. Nigeria Everywhere is the cultural promotion tag, slogan, platform of Nigeria. It's our official soft power brand and our tourism brand. So that's been adopted and approved by the president. And so what we're doing for our cultural activations globally, it's under that banner. And Screen Nigeria is the audiovisual segment of that. So film, television, animation, and gaming. And it's one of the key sectors that we see as a major growth sector and one that Nigeria has a lot of comparative advantages in. We say Nigeria is unmistakable, Nigeria is unlimited, Nigeria is everywhere, and sort of those are the mantras through we work with. So a bit about Screen Nigeria, but I will run through. Okay. So, yeah? Oh, sorry. Let me adjust myself. So we're talking about a landscape overview of the Nigerian production ecosystem. We're going to look at the insight, give you some insights, talk about the opportunities and the road ahead. Now, the Nigerian film industry, popularly referred to as Nollywood, is the second largest film industry in the world and the largest English-speaking film industry in the world. It currently contributes 2% to Nigeria's GDP based on the figures available, and it's estimated to be valued at 6.4 billion USD. This is from an Afrexim report. If you talk to filmmakers, they would say it's very undervalued compared to what it really is. But right now, officially, we're doing a data mapping study to really ascertain a base for the creative industries, because we have some other statistics, for example, that the creative industries is the second largest employer of labor in the country after agriculture. So we know that these figures, although they are the official figures, are not very representative of what's really on ground. Just a bit about the evolution of Nollywood. And the Nigerian cinema space. We'll look at in the beginning, it really has its origins in the dramatic disciplines in theater that eventually were moved into the Nigerian television era. So you're looking at the 50s and 80s when you had the state television network that produced a lot of shows, dramas, and that was sort of how we produced our talent and got people going. So a lot of the theater arts departments at the universities in the country, really, you see churned out the people that we see today are like the major front runners, and that was really where the craft was honed. And then we got into the boom era, with home videos, DVDs, the Nollywood that went viral, in the 90s to 2000s, the ones you see everywhere, now making its way to YouTube, and that's really what took us internationally and around the world. So it gave us our popularity in regions like the Caribbean, in Asia, and in Europe, and largely aided by the diaspora. And their demand for it, and it's been able to cross borders, so it became an Africa phenomenon. And we have our modern era. So, in the 2010s to now, what you've seen is an aggressive push towards standardization, upskilling, making sure that we are on par with other countries, looking at what's being done everywhere, and saying that how do we match up or surpass it? So that's led to different things. We saw move from more of a television style production to more cinematic productions, employing the latest of technology. We saw the streamers come in, and then we saw some Nigerian films start, making bookmarks, entering the top 10s and all that stuff, being number one globally on the charts for the big streamers and showing us that there are other markets. So for the first time, we're able to really get some data to show that people here are consuming us, people here are demanding us, and there are interesting places we need to develop. So, interesting places like the Middle East, Korea, Brazil started popping up, and also the type of content that they were interested in. So that's really informed some of what is going on, and we'll talk a bit about that during the panel conversation. We're seeing an increasing formalization of the Nigerian ecosystem. From the shifts from television into home videos and now coming into cinema, you're seeing people trying to bring in more of the traditional processes, taking learnings from the US, from traditional European markets. So looking at on the production side, trying to format the scripts more standardized, the financing and casting arrangements, trying to make it in a way that merges with what's going on outside. And, distribution and exhibition, we saw a return of cinemas to the country in about 2006. They had all sort of tapered out in the late 80s due to structural adjustments and economic shifts. But what we saw was a resurgence, and it's been very interesting. We'll talk a bit more about that on the panel. Infrastructure, you're seeing a lot of investment in studios, a lot of post-production facilities coming up, production houses springing up to feed this demand for content and the African story. And then we're seeing production services really boom. So rental houses, location services, representation. And we're seeing this now project out of Nigeria. So supplying markets like the West African market, the East African and Central African markets. And so because Nigeria has a very strategic place, if you look at us on the map, we're quite central in the African, so left to right, so east to west and north to south. And we're halfway from London to Cape Town or Joburg, so it makes it easier sometimes for people to pull stuff in. And we're only about 6 hours away from every major European city on a direct flight, so that's really helped that. Some example of key industry players. We don't cover everybody on here, but we have Anaku, who did Black Book, that was number one for a period on the Netflix charts and stayed for a few weeks at about number 4. We have Nemsia as well. They've done some great work. Ebony Life, Film One, Inkblot, Cap now, Cinemax. The distributors, we've got Film One, Genesis now, Cinemax, Silverbird, Blue Pictures. Platforms, we've got Iroko TV, which is a homegrown streaming platform that really started way before everybody else. It started way before the Netflixes and the rest decided to look our way. And you have Netflix, still in the market doing their thing, and then Showmax, which is from South Africa, originally from South Africa, but really serves more of an African demand. So they have a different localization strategy, sort of trying to coexist with everyone. And then the main regulators for the space are the Federal Ministry of Culture, and then the Nigerian Film Corporation, and then we have the Broadcast Commission, which regulates all broadcasts in the country. So, the distribution evolution, is necessary to talk about that to understand how the business has grown, how productions have evolved, and why we're seeing what we're seeing. So it's primarily VCDs and DVDs, which, suffered from supply chain mishaps and mismatches, not being developed enough. So we don't enjoy, for example, the supply chain you have in Europe or in the United States, where it's easy to move product. So I could say, I put DVDs, for example, in every Walmart. We don't have that formalization of that side of the market, not just for films, but just for products in general. Sort of African consumption patterns a bit different. So that limited our growth to certain degrees, and things like piracy, just, again, piracy trying to feed the supply gap because people wanted the products. So that was that. Then the cinema revival, like I talked about, and that's really been able to give us a base of what's going on. So we have numbers. Nigerian cinema ecosystem is plugged into ComScore. So, the numbers are verifiable, and we're seeing good trends. I know I was looking at the numbers Sinners did, for example, in Nigeria, and that was quite interesting for them. But what's unique about Nigeria is, compared to a lot of markets, we have strong local content performance. So local content in Nigeria does 50 to 60% of the box office, which is very rare compared to other developed or similar markets. The streaming dominance, so Nigeria has always had a leapfrog effect, like I said, we have the supply chain problem with physical distribution, but we did that with telecoms where the landlines weren't as fully connected, but we adopted mobile so quickly and grew faster than everyone else. And it's the same thing that we're seeing with streaming. Nigerians are consuming on Netflix, on Showmax, on Amazon, on YouTube, WhatsApp. They are willing to consume everything. We have 250 million people, and we have at least 110 mobile devices. So you can imagine that that's crazy in terms of numbers. International expansion. So there's a lot of interest. Local producers moving out, local content running outside, and you have a lot of diaspora also looking back in, collaborating. You have a lot of internationals saying, how do we work with you? We're interested in your market. We have the global festivals that are now taking place in Nigeria, like AFRIF. We have international festivals looking in to say, hey, how do we collaborate with you guys? We want more producers. So is Cannes, is it TIFF, is it Berlin saying we need more participation in our markets? And I think that really speaks to the fact that there's a global acknowledgement that we have unique stories that engage audiences and can do great things. Now, the funding landscape, it depends on how you look at it, but I think this quite it makes sense the way it's set up. So I would go from the bottom. So what happens historically with our industry is that a lot of it is basically producer-led funding, so self-funding, equity funding, private capital. So we're a very commercial market. What you find is that investors invest, producers invest their own money, people pull funds just because they see the potential and because of the dynamism in the industry. And it's what's made us quite nimble and very reactive to audience perception and audience needs. We're seeing an increasing formalization with private investment. So you're seeing venture capitalist firms, capital organizations that manage money, fund managers saying they want to take an interest. And, that's really going to propel what's going on. And we've seen some cases where they've come in and helped expand the cinema industry and financing films and sort of some of the streamer deals. Institutional funding, so we're currently finalizing the setup of the Creative Economy Development Fund, which is a national promoted fund that's going to be, when done, set up as a private vehicle, or as a standalone vehicle, with private-public partnerships involved, funding from developmental organizations, funding from the government, funding from investors, but it's looking at providing a full-scale financial solution, so grants, equity, and debt, affordable debt for all sides of the creative sector. And obviously, there's a film fund under that's really going to help us propel, for this new era of Nigerian film. And then co-productions. A lot of partnerships are springing up. We have My Father's Shadow, an official selection in a certain regard. That's Nigeria's first ever, selection at the Cannes Film Festival. And although people say it's an unofficial co-production, but it shows the kind of collaborations we're doing with other countries. There's a lot of examples. There was Shine Your Eyes as well. That was a Nigeria-Brazil co-production that was at Berlinale in 2019 and got picked up by Netflix and did really well. It was Nigerian story set in Brazil. So we're seeing those type of things evolve, and that's bringing in sort of the more traditional finance structures, which we hope with our own creative fund will be able to merge and make something beautiful happen. Strengths. Like I said, we're the second largest producers in the world, only topped by our Indian brothers. These figures, 2,500 films, are actually, so I'll explain how we get this. So we produce way more than this, but these are the films that are actually produced and brought to our classifications agency and get an actual certificate. So these are officially certified in that sense. So you can imagine there's way more. It's a lot, I know. We have strong local demand, like I mentioned earlier. Nigerians want to see themselves. Nigerians want to see their experiences. I want to see their own stories, and they come out when they see those things, whether it's on TV or in the box office. The cultural resonance, I'm sure a lot of you are a bit familiar with Afrobeats, Burna Boy, Davido, Thames, Irasta. We're seeing that the music has moved very fast. The fashion is moving. Nollywood moved first a long time ago, like I said, with the DVD route. But what we're seeing now is that Nigerian culture generally is becoming global culture, is becoming world culture and pop culture. And so that's also fueling some of this demand for our stories. So people want to see Lagos. They want to, see what's going on in Lagos, the lifestyle, Dirty December. They want to understand what's going on the continent. They want to experience that. They want to see those stories. So and you see it creeping as well into what's being done in Europe, what's being done in the US, where they're now having Nigerian characters talking about Nigerian themes on primetime shows. So that's one of the big strengths we see, the diversity of our culture. Just to add to that, Nigeria, 250 million people, we have over 250 different tribes and languages. So it's a very, very diverse country. You move 1 kilometer in one direction and it's a new set of people and culture. So we have a lot to tap from. And then cost efficiency. Nigeria is, depending on who you talk to, number one or number two in terms of cost of living in the world, lowest countries. So that brings its own advantages. And because of how nimble we are and the reactiveness, it means that we have cost efficiencies. So, what might not be feasible in Atlanta or London or Cape Town, definitely in Nigeria will work. And we're seeing that a segment of the industry, maybe a bit lower on the budget, looking for a home is now shifting with those international collaborations and co-productions, so they're coming home. Trends and emerging opportunities, like I said, the international breakouts, Shine Your Eyes at Berlinale. Eyimofe was at Berlinale same year, 2019, and it got picked up by the Criterion Collection. Eyimofe was fully shot in Nigeria. My Father's Shadow fully shot in Nigeria at Cannes this year. The streaming revolution, driving quality and new audiences. A talented youth population, like immensely talented youth population. For context, I tell you 250 million people, right? 70% of Nigeria's population is less than 35. That's larger than Germany and the UK's entire populations combined. 50% of the population is 18 and below. That's larger than twice the size of France. So that's to tell you that we are developing, one, a massive pool to supply talent for creativity for the industry, but also a massive pool of people to consume, which what we're seeing is that in the coming years, we're going to tilt to a position where Nigeria becomes a big monetization market for global films. So genre diversification, like I said, I bound a lot of different interests from Afrofuturism. You have sci-fi, fantasy all coming in, driven by our literary sort of prowess, driven by our cultural stories, our folklores, and people are now starting to immerse these in what's going on. And recently there was a CNN TV series by Roy Okupe and his studio, animation series, 2 seasons. So you're seeing those kind of movements happen. Unique stories, unique experiences that largely the world has not seen. And we're trying to bring that in this era where it's just regurgitated IP and, it's being rehashed. We're bringing fresh stories. And like I said, the production support and services ecosystem is really growing. So what are the ongoing reforms? Tax incentives are coming. At our parliament, they recently passed the tax laws that are basically reshaping over 100 years of tax laws. So in the coming months, we'll be announcing the full program for our production tax credits. And we hope this will attract a lot more productions. I mentioned the creative fund that's being developed. Infrastructure investments coming, so we're setting up an infrastructure company to co-invest with private sector in a minority fashion, but to give that support. And then co-production treaties that are, being finalized. So we have a few coming. Brazil's almost done. I'm sure we'll sign that next month. And then we have India as well, and the South African one already signed. And then the UK and France are also coming behind once the fund is set up. So the road ahead, is Nigeria's decade of creativity. We know that stories, ideas are going to rule the world, and we believe that we have that in abundance, and that we're going to be able to redefine global filmmaking. We're seeing increased co-productions and global market access for our stories as the next frontier. And, these films making it into the festivals, being picked up officially, being commissioned, is really showing us that trend. And we see that we can expand and make more of that. And then, of course, we see Nigeria as the next film destination due to our cost advantages, our talent pool, investments in training, in infrastructure, and whatnot, that basically we will be the home for storytellers that need to really tell their story. So thank you so much. I hope I didn't go too fast. But please allow me to invite our panelists to join me. Please, can you help me welcome Ms. Chioma Ude? She's the founder of the African International Film Festival. This is Nigeria's top film festival. Please, thank you. Can you help me welcome Mr. Uche Okocha? He's a producer. He runs Trino Studios. and Trino's Motion Picture Company in Nigeria. Please help me welcome Isioma Idibe. She's a lawyer, partner of the firm Punuka Attorneys and Solicitors, and also founder of Verif Content, which is an IP verification service. And last but not the least, a man quite popular and who's done great things, Mr. Steve Lucas. He's a producer, and he's just, I think, have you guys finished? No, but currently what he's running is a very unique program where they're making, is it 12 films? Yes. But it's a slate of 12 films, but all by first-time directors, but using his platform to get them access to distribution, and, you know, so it's some amazing stuff. So thank you. I know we don't have too long. You guys, basically, I know what you do and the work you've done, and you've covered a lot of the industry and been around for quite a while. So looking at the ecosystem right now and this zeitgeist that's happening, what do you see as the next frontier and the way forward, and the opportunities that are bound for, you know, the people in the room to connect with Nigeria and do work with Nigeria? So who wants to go first? Ladies. Okay, ladies first. Which of the ladies? Okay. Yeah, you can.
Hello. Okay. Good afternoon. Good morning. My name is Choma Ude, and I run the Africa International Film Festival. We've been at it for 15 years. So we generally have the ears and eyes of foreign organizations that want to come in, and also the local producers that want to go out. So the question is what we foresee as the immediate future. For Nigeria, I mean, we're going through so much right now with the streaming platforms coming in and re-strategizing, productions going up. People are still in the middle of production, so nobody can stop, right? So we're still going to produce whatever it is we were working on. And so for me, coming into this narrative we have right now, I believe we need a market really, really quickly. Because if we don't get a market and we don't understand regional sales and just owning what we have, then when these platforms do come back, they're going to see us at the same level or even less, so we'd be very disadvantaged. To avoid that, we need to start our own market, understand what it is to have a market, what your film is to be in a market, you know, whether it's pre-production level, just writing stage, or being commissioned to make the film. We need to understand the intricacies of sales and buying of our projects. That would set us on a different level. When I say level, I'm talking about bargaining. So right now, what we have is the streamers come in and say, okay, we need your film, and they buy it global at a rate I won't even bother mentioning here. But if we start our own market, understand regional sales, then when they do come back and mention those kind of figures, you say, oh no, I sold this to France or to Africa or for this. And so the bargaining power definitely changes. So for me, I'm embarking on that journey to start a film market this year for the industry. Thank you.
Lovely. You've opened up a very interesting point. I think I would lead through just, you know, so you guys, so you talked about sort of the bargaining power and having the market, and I think what you're really speaking to is, like we talk about access to markets, opening up new market, but data and having this pipeline, right? So speaking to that, Isioma, you worked, you know, I know your work as a lawyer, but your work in terms of Verif Content and looking at the trends of how content moves, what's going on, how do you see the importance of this data from a market-led, from a sales point of view, being able to help us define, or let me say redefine how we interact with, you know, these co-productions that we're doing, these sales, this global platform. So now we're looking outside of just being within ourselves and the regular way, but going out. How do you see that really playing in?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So for me, I think right now the industry is at a crossroads where it's either we sort of benefit from the zeitgeist and interest in Nollywood at the moment, or we remain stagnant, or we fall behind. And I think what I find, I mean, we're very lucky with, and not because you are here, I think a lot of us in our private time in the industry are very happy that, one, you have a government that prioritized the creative industry and specifically prioritized the film industry for the first time in our history. I mean, we've always had a Ministry of Information and Culture, but there wasn't really like an emphasis on the creative economy, you know, dimensioning it as an active part of the economy and trying to create policies that support its growth. And I think that is what has been absent when you look at Nollywood. Nollywood has done very well in terms of growing on its own. So I was looking at your presentation talking about investment structures. Nollywood has always pretty much been private equity funded, and you know, that has always limited scalability to a very large extent. And what we're seeing now, and hopefully when all these policies and funds are properly implemented, is to create that enabling environment for the sector that is supported by the right policies to allow the sector to scale. And so bringing it down to your specific question around data, in my job as a lawyer, it's quite frustrating when you are negotiating with a streamer or any other buyer for your client's content, because you're basically negotiating blind. Contractually, in other markets, they have a legal obligation to share data, and so that, you know, and even just basically the way the unions work and things like that, everyone has an idea of cost of production and sort of how much you can get for your content. We don't have that kind of, we don't have that in Nigeria. They have these very tight confidentiality clauses that don't allow producers to share information. The guilds that we do have in Nigeria are just pretty much dead. And so even when you are negotiating, let's say on the talent end, there's nothing. Producers don't even have a share of intellectual property most times, because there isn't any law that mandates that they have that share of the intellectual property. So even if you wanted to, and these are, you know, these policy issues are some of the ways that you're able to have this data that we don't have. And so I think there needs to also be a focus on those things, and then also having proper international co-productions that would mean that these productions will have to register through a system, and again allow us to have some kind of data around sort of what was the value of this production, how many people were employed. I mean, anytime I see data about Nollywood, I find it quite funny, because I just wonder, like, where? The only viable data that you have is the number of productions, because you can go to the census board and see that they register 2,500. But realistically, everything else, there's no data. So for me, I think it's making sure that the policies support that enabling environment so that we can have that data. I think in terms of training, I mean, it's funny that I'm sitting beside, I call her Auntie Chioma. So when I started as an entertainment lawyer in Nigeria, first of all, it was like, what is an entertainment lawyer? We thank God that we've moved well past that stage now. But I thought it was, what I found was a lot of people didn't even know simple things like chain of title, you know, just basic stuff. And AFRIF was so important, because I started out doing training programs and workshops, just training people about chain of title, you know, clauses and things like that. And so you see, but AFRIF is 100% privately funded. It does not receive any significant public funding. And the question is, how sustainable is that in long term, right? So these, in terms of even you can create these policies that would allow for there to be more information, but also there has to also be skill training for the industry to actually understand how the film ecosystem works. I think a lot of people make films in Nigeria, but don't actually understand how the film industry works. And so I always say this very controversial thing, and I say that we don't have a film industry really, we have a film community, because there isn't enough depth and dimension within the space, like you would see in more developed markets, to really confidently say that you have an industry. And I think there's a space for the industry accepting this as a fact and doing all the necessary work, which I think is a public-private partnership to get us to where we have the potential to be in terms of specifically monetization, deepening our distribution systems, having, data that would drive more investment into the space. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. Talking about the depth and sort of that formalization that is needed, necessary, and required, I think it's good we're now turning to the producers. It's interesting the way you guys separated yourselves. I'm just laughing about that. But, I mean, both of you have made all kinds of films, all kinds of things, big films, and worked with a lot of people from, within Africa, outside, working on co-productions. How do you see this in terms of what they speak about, this information, this formalized structure, and where we're at and where we're going, where we need to be, and how that feeds into the work that you do and the opportunities that really presents?
Well, good morning, everyone. I think that the lack of formality is both a strength and a weakness. There are areas in which things can happen at speeds that structures would limit, and that's a good thing. And my hope is that even as we structure, we do not structure to the point where that is stifled. So that's the first thing that I see. But I also see growth in two directions. One outwards, one inwards. And you talk about 250 million people, and 70% of that being young people. A deepening of the distribution, but even more so the exhibition arm of things, is something that conversations are already happening about, that I can see really strengthening the industry. Because in a way that the pullout of the streamers affected Nigeria, it didn't quite affect countries like India, for example, because in the chain of monetization of content, what we lack is the first layer, which is a deepened cinema and ecosystem that allows you to be able to recoup investments, on that end. So it's interesting to hear conversations happening where we have 774 local governments in the country, and conversations are happening about putting a screen at least in each of those locations. 774 screens in a country that probably at the moment has about 300 screens or slightly more would be a very big, impact for the industry. And how that is structured to the benefit of local films would also be a very strong element for us to look at. So that's an interesting development that's happening. But also the pullout of the streamers at the moment is engendering all kinds of conversations. And I think part of those conversations is about the quality of the films that we make and the aspirations and ambitions of those films. That there is a market that's local, but there is another layer that's international, and understanding that and looking into the pool of co-productions in structuring the films that projects that you're developing to be able to be forward-facing in that instance is also something that is really, really strong. But I do agree that what is happening at the present is creating the enabling environment for a lot of that growth that is required to happen. So I'd say it's really interesting times for the industry at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, like you said, these conversations are happening. You talk about let me say what I would refer to as the dynamism of the industry. So I'll put it to Uche. I mean, you just recently had a run with your film, The Weekend, did Tribeca. I think you did London as well. Yeah, I did a couple festivals and picked up awards. And I know you have other stuff working. But when he talks about sort of that dynamism, let's say what we see is sort of the spirit and the soul of Nollywood, in essence, how do you see that? Let me say being a thing that stands us out, but helps us integrate into those more formalized structures that he speaks about.
Okay, great. Wonderful. How does it help us stand out? The kind of stories that we tell. For instance, I'd use an example, The Weekend. the weekend was very experimental for us. What we did is that we took a familiar premise and then we told it from an African perspective, basically. So it's a product that anyone can watch, but you watch it from a new perspective. You know, you see a different culture, you see mannerisms, you see costumes, you see sets, you know, and it's what it does is that it gives you an insight into what it looks like in Nigeria or in Africa or wherever it is, and that's one way of integrating and also exporting, our local content, our internally produced and developed films, and it's worked. The product has been showcased on so many festivals, and I strongly believe that that's one strategy. Another strategy is, I know we talk about the creative economy, the creative system, as well as a whole, but I also think the business is also very important. A lot of producers don't really understand the business, and that's what Isioma was talking about. People know how to make films, but they don't know how to sell a film, right? There are quite a number of training programs, workshops that AFRIF has really made accessible to people. But I feel like more training workshops and programs that focus on the business side, like for sales agents, for distribution executives, are very important, because you need people that know how to sell our stories, that know how to promote it, that know how to market it, position it. It is very important, right? People that are going to travel with it and talk to different territories, and let them see the beauty in it, and the opportunity in it, and that's also very important. I think that's another area that we also need to really invest in and focus in. We recently just launched a program called the International Sales and Development Executive Program, where we're training 12 filmmakers on sales and development and distribution. And I think that's a good starting point, and it's something we hope to keep running every year. I strongly believe it's important that not just the creative side is being invested in, but also the business side is very important, and that's how I really believe that our industry, can grow as a whole.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm seeing a very similar thread. So you spoke about the need for a market, and us being able to assert ourselves and define for ourselves what happens. You speak about knowing how to sell, the business side, the structuring of it, that the pure creatives, pardon me for using that, might not be the best at, and which is reinforced that you talked about the sort of formalization that is necessary and could happen and should happen and is happening gradually, and where we're getting a bit more structure. And like you said, Uche, in terms of the program you're supporting for the executives. Now, speaking about this collaboration, international co-productions, where people can come in and how that could happen, I'm seeing that as maybe like a first step, where people that are more experienced in the sort of market environment of how that works from a sort of sales, distribution, development point of view, can start working with us and saying, okay, these are interesting filmmakers, interesting production houses, interesting festivals, interesting management companies. How can we come in and bring value and create shared value and be that bridge into sort of the global space? And I know that all of you are probably working on a few things like this, but I don't know, is there anything around this and what you've seen in trying to explore this? Any insights anybody could share? This one is open now.
Okay, I'll give you an insight into a production and the kind of discussions that were had. And this was in Hollywood. So you have a big Hollywood director that has come to the festival, has had a master class, and he said he left the festival feeling very kind of lost, because he wondered, where would all this talent go to? And so in his mind, this was like 3-4 years ago, he started planning out a thing. And with what is going on in the industry right now, it only made sense for him to come up with a co-production deal now. Now, he puts his name to a film, that brings up a different kind of attention. He's a big director, so he says, give me a Nigerian director, and I'm going to attach an American director to this film. And so he sits down like a supervising director, and he's teaching them right now how to co-direct. That's the first step. In writing the movie, he brought 2 Oscar Award winners who came to Nigeria during the festival, observed, and came up with this story. Now, I've read this story, and we feel like it still lacks the Nigerian authenticity, but has what globally people would love to see. So we attach that writing to the director. Typically, the writer and the director, they're going to knock heads, because the writer doesn't want his stories changed, and the director is saying it has to be changed for us to move forward. So in doing that, the so he brings in a sales company, which typically we don't do. We just go ahead and make our film. Now, the sales company says to us, we need XYZ to move this forward, and we're going to be the theatrical distributors of this film. Now, for them to do that, they need at least an A-lister diaspora. So we attach one to the film. And then now, they've read the story, and they say, okay, maybe we need a bit more action. So there are things we don't understand, that importing foreign directors, producers who've done this over and done it successfully would say to us, this is what the film should typically look like for us to sell it. So there's a pre-sales. And so we're working very closely with all these different producers, different directors that want to work on the continent. I had a very interesting conversation with Baba. He gave me some insights today. We have a film fund that just came out. And really, if those filmmakers want to come to Nigeria and make those kind of films and access those film funds, then we should really have a Nigerian producer attached to it, where 50% of ownership also goes to us. And so that's an interesting dimension I'm going to add to all the A-listers that are constantly calling to say, what is this film fund about? How do we go about things? There's a lot of conversation. I'm very interested in what he said with regards to the trainings that are attached to this market. But are there good conversations coming out of this pivot the industry is doing? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just also add.
Sorry, before you speak, we'll just have about 3 minutes to round up. I'm getting looks all around, but so just, yeah.
I'm not very good at being systems, but I'll try. I mean, there's just so much to say. Nollywood frustrates me, but excites me greatly. Those who know. So, but it's an exciting time where you have the private sector sort of getting their own skill level up, and you have the public sector doing what it needs to do. I've been coming to Cannes. I think this is my 4th Cannes. And I remember the first time I came to Cannes, I was so frustrated that there wasn't a Nigerian pavilion. And today, we have a Nigerian pavilion, a very good Nigerian pavilion. Not only do we have a Nigerian pavilion coming back, and then we also have a Nigerian film shot 100% in Nigeria and by Nigerian storytellers with a Nigerian production company attached to it in competition, right? So this is a great year, and I think that just summarizes where the industry is going. And I think this is a great time for everyone to tag along. We need to be in Nigeria, we need to be looking at our intellectual property. We need to understand how that intellectual property works, because a huge part of sales is nobody wants to buy damaged goods. That has always also been a huge challenge, and being able to resolve those things, having the right support, these co-productions that are happening informally. We hope that we will see these treaties coming through. We hope that we would see more Nigerian pavilions at international festivals all over the world that would take Nigerian delegations to the world, and also bring international delegations to Nigeria with festivals like AFRIF. So when we really cement these this private and public sector collaboration, and Nigerians are very smart, not because I'm Nigerian, we are some of the smartest people in the world. And so honestly, in about 2 years, if we come back here, first of all, they'll put us in a much better space. That's for one. And when we come back, we wouldn't be talking about the potential. We'll be talking about what we've done, so that's what I see. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I think that's a perfect way to end. For the Q&A, we will move to the Nigerian pavilion. It's 1904 on this floor, Palais 1. So thank you so much. Thank you to the production team. You've been a great help. Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely day. Yeah.